now, the busiest man at this time of the year is Joel Corry, because you are the salary cap expert and a great knowledge because you filled multiple roles in this league. And so that's why I always love talking to you at this time of the year, but I think everybody else does as well. So I do want to talk first about your podcast. And I know the last one, I believe you had some talk about Matthew Stafford, Aaron Donald, et cetera, and their contracts. What do you have coming up for future podcasts that people would that need to listen to?
Probably a franchise tag preview, since the 15-day window for designating franchise players open today. So that'll probably be what'll come up next.
Very good. And it's like I said, it's always good information. And throughout, not just this time, but throughout the rest of the season, because as you know, salary cap numbers and contracts always matter all the time. So I do want to get to some here. I want to get to some national stuff or some national names, but let's start here because Terry McLaurin just finished his third year, going into the last year of his deal. What would you foresee as a contract for him? And when do you think something like that might get done?
If I'm him, I don't have any urgency because I want to see how the landscape changes in 2022. And mainly other guys who are in my draft class. There are 3 second-round picks in particular that he should be paying attention to: Deebo Samuel, A.J. Brown, and DK Metcalf. He may not get to their level of money contractually, but the better they do, the better he should do. He's had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. He's been the leading receiver the past 2 years. I can't see a scenario where he's going to agree to anything less than the $18 million per year Kenny Golladay got from the Giants, which has $40 million in overall guarantees and $28 million fully guaranteed at signing.
So you'd think he would not get to the level of like DK, Deebo, and that group, and Brown?
Yeah, just the notch below them. But sometimes the guy who goes last will be able to leapfrog other guys. So that's why he would wait, because let's say they all come in at 21, 22 million per year. Then the 18 I'm talking about, he's probably going to be pushed over 20.
Right. Brandon Sheriff, free agent. Now this team, they had made an offer, and Mark Mayhew said it publicly, and I'd heard last year that they made him that offer in the 15, 16 per year range. We never know the details. So it always until you know all the details, but we knew he was going to stay on the tag because it made financial sense. What do you see for him now on the open market? What kind of deal do you think he would command?
Well, he's not going
to. No pun intended on the command.
He's not going to want to make less than the average of the 2 tags these played under, which is basically 16.5 a year. Historically, we've seen when a Pro Bowl caliber guard hits the open market, he becomes the highest paid player at the position. Right now, that's a tie between Joel Bitonio and Joe Thuney at $16 million per year. So I fully anticipate that he's going to be the highest paid guard, at least temporarily, until Quentin Nelson surpasses him. There's one team in particular that has been aggressive in free agency the past 2 years on the defensive side of the ball that desperately needs to upgrade the offensive line. The Cincinnati Bengals. The big holdup of Cincinnati is the only guaranteed money in veteran contracts is a signing bonus, and that might not be attractive when you're trying to set the market at a position.
How will his injuries play into this? Because he hasn't had, I think it's been like 6 years now or something like that since he's played a full season, and not just a full season, but it's always 3, 4, 5 games missed. How will that factor in here, do you think?
Well, if I'm the team, I want per game roster bonuses so I get cap and cash break if he's not active for games. That same issue is probably going to apply to Terron Armstead because he's always hurt. Saints can't put a franchise tag on him because when the contract voids, which is after the designation period ends, but you don't see Pro Bowl caliber left tackles in their prime. Rarely hit the open market. So if I'm the Jacksonville Jaguars, I've got a ton of cap room. My first priority is protecting Trevor Lawrence. If I have to make him Armstead the highest paid tackle in the league, so be it.
With guards, because again, Sheriff, 16.5 for a guard, it still feels high, even though that's what the number would be. It's still hard to fathom that a guards would be making that kind of money. When did you see that change? And was that as much because you get, that's become listen, you have to have good linemen all over the place. But then when you get guys like the Aaron Donalds of the world who are rushing inside, you need to have guys who can combat them. Is that, what do you think?
Well, you saw the guards start to really separate from centers when you had guards like Kelechi Osemele hitting free agency, then Andrew Norwell, Kevin Zeitler. That's where you saw the separation, and it's continued. The big change in offensive line pay has been right tackle salaries starting to creep up to left tackle salaries. At one time, Lane Johnson was the highest paid offensive lineman on the right side, and that was until Laramie Tunsil corrected that. And now you've got like going rate for a right tackle at basically 18, 19 million per year of like Ryan Ramczyk right now setting the tone for right tackles.
Did you like the deal they gave Charles Leno?
Yeah, I thought that was a good deal for everybody under the circumstances. I don't know if I do a deal right before the end of the regular season. It has to be, from an agent standpoint, it has to be a deal where I get exactly what I want my number to do it, because your best deal most likely comes right before that 2-day window where you can shop yourselves to other teams when right before free agency starts, which begins on March 14th.
And of course, we have the combine coming up. How vital is that to all of these negotiations and discussions?
Yeah, well, the combine is a place where you have agents have meetings with teams and basically tamper, because you're not supposed to discuss contracts or players who are under contract, even though they will be impending free agents. But agents at the very least get an idea of who's in, who's out, and whether the target price they have makes sense. Sometimes, at least in the past, when the combine and the start of free agency basically ran into each other, deals would get worked out, but you don't as much have those deals getting worked out in these meetings, because you now have that 48-hour window, which started about 5 years ago, where you can start negotiating before free agency starts.
How often do you think agents have a good idea of who might be after a guy, even going into the combine? Because I've talked to some in the past who it's like, yeah, they know that a team is interested in them, not because they're tampering, but because they might call up and say, hey, how is so-and-so doing? How is his mom? But that's just
you can get a sense that way, because particularly if you have a client on that team, it might come up in a conversation about another guy. So that's a way teams can kind of cover themselves. We're not having a conversation about this guy. It was kind of a side subject to a different conversation. But yeah, you might have an idea going in that this team might be interested, but you really get an idea based on who schedules meetings with you. Let's say you have, 4 teams need a tight end, and if you have a tight end that's available, and 4 teams that have a need schedule meeting with you, it doesn't take a genius to figure out what guy they're talking about.
Right. And you're talking about a meeting at the combine.
Yes.
Yeah. Where do you think, like, where do the best deals get done there? Is it, because obviously everybody knows Prime 47 and all that, but where, like, are we talking like just, is this over drinks? Is it during the day, or how do those usually transpire?
Oh, sometimes they're morning meetings. They might be in a hotel suite, because teams will have a suite at a certain hotel, and you go meet with the GM, maybe the cap guy, and maybe one other front office person. So they can happen anywhere. It might happen over dinner. It all depends on the schedule, because you got to remember that they're there for the combine, and also they're trying to schedule stuff with other people as well. And you have your own schedule, because presumably you have clients who are going to be draft eligible with the combine, and you have to try to fit everything in. So it all is based on how everyone's schedule can be accommodated.
Has it changed? Has that process changed much for agents, you think, over the years, as far as at the combine? I mean, it's obviously grown big, but has anything really changed for them about how they have to go about the process there?
Yeah, I think the one thing which has changed is you have that 48-hour pre-negotiation window. So it kind of
that's a big deal.
Yeah, it kind of slows down the whole process of trying to exchange numbers, so to speak, which you're not supposed to do, but did get done. So I do remember there was a free agency deal, I forget how many years ago, that was done right when free agency started with Albert Hainsworth. And it's like, there's no way that deal got done that quickly unless something was previously discussed.
Right. Yeah. No, I remember that deal very well. So let's go back to some Washington stuff. Landon Collins, he's a guy that's going to count 16.2 on the cap this year. I know they want him back, but I also know that there's a chance that the only chance that shouldn't say the only, that one way that he would guarantee back is to restructure or pay cut or whatever. How hard is that with a veteran like that to get that done? And what would be the things that his side would be looking at to make sure it's palatable for him to do that?
Well, that's where the combine also comes in handy, that if you have a guy that you think may have to take a pay cut, you do a survey of who might be interested and try to get an idea of how much someone could get paid if you reject a pay cut, and then go from there. If you see that the market won't develop the way you'd like, then the pay cut becomes more attractive. And I'll give you an example of a non-combine situation. We used to represent John Randall, and there was a year Minnesota wanted to have him take a pay cut. And first thing we did was me and my partner split up teams, called around to see what the market would be. Seattle was like, hey, we'll make them whole. So that made it very easy to reject a pay cut from Minnesota. That's how John Randall ended up in Seattle. Now, if you're taking a pay cut, then you still want to be made whole, but then it might be through some sort of not likely to be earned incentives. And the easiest thing to do would be play time, because that's probably easier to achieve than a statistical threshold like interceptions.
And so when you look at Landon, well, first of all, like, well, what do you think his value on the open market would be if he's free? What kind of deal do you think he might get?
It won't be the 12 million he's supposed to make. That's for sure. Could be half of that. So that's one of the things you have to factor into it, is how much could I realistically get on the open market versus staying where I am, and how much I can make and how much I could potentially make back if I exceed expectations through the incentives.
So that's why I say, like, to me, it sounds like there's a good chance that something like that could happen here. And
sometimes you get a player who's just offended a team wants to take a pay cut, looks at it emotionally, and he's like, I'm going to go elsewhere. And then
no matter what.
Yeah, well, no matter what. That's not the advisable way to look at it. And that's where the agent's supposed to act as a buffer. But then you start looking at, okay, what coaches around the league had success with him or he has good relationships with, and do they have a need at the position? And you start targeting those, because something I learned very early on the agent side of the business was familiarity brings comfort. And I noticed that with Bill Parcells, that he had his guys that were giants that followed him to New England, that followed him wherever he went. He had his Parcells guys. And then Belichick, when he went to Cleveland, brought in like the Pepper Johnsons, the Carl Banks of the world. So you kind of see that happening.
Let's say, and I was going to ask you about
it's happening right here, because how did Kyle Allen end up in Washington?
There have been a few guys that have come here for that reason. And so
Curtis Samuel.
Yeah, there's a long list. Thomas Davis the year before. But that's what I was going to ask you too, from an agent's perspective, if your guy, like, how much, when you have the pay cut or restructure, however it is, how much do you take into account the ego of the player? Can they accept it? Because I remember talking to a GM years ago who did not want to offer a certain player a pay cut here because they felt like it would be a problem for this guy in the locker room if he starts out playing another guy. And so how much do you take that into account, and how do you go about convincing the guy that this is actually the best place for you?
Well, you've got to look at it. What's in the best interest for your client? Hopefully he looks at it that way. And it's like, look, we're trying to get you in the best position possible to set you up for the future beyond this year. And what's going to do that? If you have to bite the bullet now to stay put and you play well, we'll remember that. If they want to do an extension, that'll be factored into those negotiations. So you try to take the emotion out of it. It's harder for the player, but as the agent, you have to be detached and look at it as objectively as possible.
And then the other guy I want to ask about, because he'll be coming up not this year, but next, is Deron Payne. Right? We talked about him last year too, and I'm just curious what you would see for him in a deal whenever that deal comes.
Well, eventually you can't pay everybody on that defensive line, and Chase Young was not having the year that was expected. So I don't know how he factors into it when he comes back into it, but do you really want to commit? And I'm calling Jonathan Allen interior defensive lineman. Do you really want to factor in you're going to pay two guys significant money on the interior because he's not. They're not edge rushers, so I don't.
Right.
That's why I consider them interior guys. So you've got one guy, I think 19. So you're probably going 15 or more. Do you really want to do that?
I think that's a lot.
Because we're not even talking about the edge rushers yet.
Right, exactly. And those edge rushers last year, you thought those edge rushers, if they progressed to where people thought or expected, could be in that 25 to 30 range. Now,
I'm going to pump the brakes on that for now.
There you go. And so where would you, exactly. So is it more with those guys still need
this year? This year will be pivotal for those guys.
Yeah. And that's, because you're right. You can't pay them all. And I agree. Like we don't know. There's I think with Chase, we saw a rookie year. We didn't see it last year. With Montez, I think there were some things to be encouraged by, but then he didn't really play the second half of the year. So we don't know where they're going to go. So I would think they'd be pivotal this year. Quarterbacks, because that's going to be the biggest thing, right? If they go out and let's just start down the list. Derek Carr, what's an extension look like for him, whether it's from the Raiders or a team trading for him?
Well, the first thing you're going to look at if you're in a contract year is if I played it out and you had to stick a tag on me, how much would that be? And you'd average the tag over 2 years. If you're talking non-exclusive, that's 35 million per year. Most quarterbacks get the exclusive. That's over 40. Now, Derek Carr last time became the highest paid player in the league, first $25 million per year player, and said he left some money on the table so they could sign 2 guys in particular, Gabe Jackson and Khalil Mack. They went 1 for 2. Now, I don't know if Derek Carr is someone who's going to not try to maximize financial gain. If so, could be closer to 35. If not, and he's looking to maximize financial gain, we're talking 40. Now, do the Raiders want to pay 40? And if signability becomes an issue, then maybe you look to deal him. And that's where you guys could come in handy because we know you guys were looking for swinging for the fences last year.
Right. Still want to do that. So, but that's where the hard part, Joel, is that with quarterbacks, there's a point where it's like, yeah, he's a good quarterback, but at what cost? And so that's, you know what I mean? Like these quarterbacks.
Yeah, I wouldn't be that concerned about that because today's 40 million is going to keep dropping down the totem pole. And here's why I say that you have Matthew Stafford, who's going to be able to name his own price if he chooses to exploit leverage this offseason. Aaron Rodgers, unless he does the Drew Brees thing and he takes a discount in his late 30s, he could be the first $50 million per year guy. Kyler Murray's eligible right now. Lamar Jackson's long overdue for an extension. That's 4 right there. Your previous quarterback, Kirk Cousins, he's never decided to leave any money on the table.
No,
he's in a contract year. He's gotten maximum leverage because how he structured contracts since getting to Minnesota. That's another guy that's up there. We haven't gotten to the 2 guys who become eligible for contract extensions after the 2022 regular season, and that's Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. So 40 million ain't going to be that much. Plus, we're looking at the salary cap from going up, and I've talked to some teams who conservatively are using 225 to 230 for 2023. And I don't know where that would put 2024. Maybe that's 260. So the cap's going to start jumping dramatically as well.
So the 40 million, while it is monstrous relative to what's going on, it may not be so horrible for.
Right. Exactly.
Might sound worse than it actually is.
Now, if you want a cost contained quarterback, it's Deshaun Watson because he's under contract for 4 years. And those 4 years average 34 million per year. The only thing is you have to have $35 million of cap space to take on his 2022 base salary. And then you also have the issue of having the sexual assault misconduct allegations resolved as well.
So then if like Russell Wilson, he'd get over 50.
That's another one that I didn't mention, that 2023 is his contract year. So you got to deal with him as well.
Man, you know what, Joe? I knew I should have continued down the path of trying to be an NFL quarterback. And, you know, the NFL loves middle-aged quarterbacks, and I blew my chance. So
problem is the money's not fully guaranteed. The most money fully guaranteed at signing an NFL quarterback is Josh Allen's $100 million. In baseball, you can get 400 million fully guaranteed
Right.
if you're the right guy. And in basketball, you're already having guys signing for over 50 million per year. And that's going to keep going up because you get a percentage of the cap with how their salary maximums work with their cap growth.
Do you think they'd ever create a separate category for quarterbacks on teams? And in relation to the cap, because I've heard some people say they should have a separate category for quarterbacks and then the rest of the team when it comes to.
Well, it didn't come up in the recently ratified CBA, I guess now 2 years ago, and that CBA runs for about a decade. So you're not going to see an amendment, I wouldn't expect, during while the CBA is in existence. So if that ever happens, it would be in the next incarnation of a CBA.
Jimmy Garoppolo, what does an extension look like for him, and how much, because there's a lot of things with him because injury history, but he's a quarterback who is available. But the Niners have to get rid of him. So, but there's going to be a market for him. So what does it look like for him?
He might benefit from these high price quarterbacks in terms of the draft capital. If you're not willing to pay the 3 first-round picks and plus the Texans want for Deshaun Watson, presumably Seattle would want that for Russell Wilson. If they even decide to trade him, he's got a no trade clause. Aaron Rodgers, even though he's older, that's going to be significant draft capital. So he could swoop in under that. Now, I don't see him taking a pay cut from his $27.5 million per year that he got after 5 or 6 good games in San Francisco, which made him the highest paid player.
Right.
He needs more things going right for him to win, but he can win. We know that. You give him a running game, a decent defense, and some weapons. As long as he's on the field, he produces victories.
Right.
So you're going to be over 30 million per year. And then he's going to look at it the same way from that non-exclusive franchise tag. Well, that's 32, then 38 basically. So you're probably going to be in the mid 30s with him as well on an extension, but the draft capital is going to be cheaper than those other guys.
Right. And that's the thing. Cause that's what I know, a team like here, they want to be, if they get the right guy, they figure like a Russell Wilson or Rodgers, you're going to feel like you can give up some of that capital because you've got the guy. A guy like Garoppolo, you're going to still want to build some way, whether it's with cap or draft picks. So you're not going to have to give up a first-round pick for him. So
I wouldn't think so. Unless all those other guys are like, say, Aaron Rodgers stays in Green Bay. Russell Wilson's not being traded. Carson's an extension. And the Deshaun Watson stuff drags on. Then the draft capital could go up because he's the guy they want. Because I'm assuming nobody's taking on Kirk Cousins' $35 million base salary and then have to give him an extension for what he's going to want. So that's where the draft capital could increase. Simple supply and demand. If you got multiple teams, then the 49ers can play that to their advantage. But I really look at that draft capital to go between the last time they had a quarterback and traded him was Alex Smith, went for 2 2s, and what you guys gave up in the Alex Smith deal, which is a third and a player. Right. So probably somewhere between there. I think if they can get a day 2 pick, worst case scenario, they do it.
Right. And I think you're right on that. And then Carson Wentz is another guy. I only have a couple more. So Carson Wentz, if he's cut, now I know there could be a trade, but to me, it's a red flag if Frank Reich is willing to do that. But
that was the only guy who was going to trade for him last time.
Right. So if he's cut, what does a deal look like for him at this stage of his career?
Well, I'm skeptical about him being cut for a couple of reasons. One, I know you'd pick up $13 million of cap room, but you have $15 million in dead money because $15 million of his 22 base salary is guaranteed without an offset. Then 2, which is to me the bigger issue, maybe the bigger hangout for the Colts, is you really don't give up a 1st and 3rd round pick to have a guy for 1 year.
Right. That's tough.
I understand Chris Ballard may not want to hang his hat on Carson Wentz because another year like this one, and they could be looking at having to polish up the resume. Yeah. Now, there are enough teams which need a quarterback. Let's say, would you rather have Mason Rudolph or Carson Wentz in Pittsburgh if he's released?
Yeah.
If you are Tampa Bay and you're looking at Blaine Gabbert or bringing back Jameis Winston or Marcus Mariota? Would you rather have Carson Wentz? Probably Carson Wentz. So, yeah, he might go there for he's got 15 he's already made. So that's going to make it a lot easier for him to take less money to try to do a one and rehabilitate himself. And then if he plays well, then he vaults back up into that huge market.
Right. And just the last one, some free agents. So I'll just get a couple of Trubisky, Mariota, and Jameis, and, Teddy Bridgewater. Is there a big variance there as far as what you think they would get out there?
It may be more opportunity because you're trying to get a starting job. Like we saw Jameis signed for, I think, we know the bridge quarterback market last year was established by Ryan Fitzpatrick
Right.
and Andy Dalton. So that's basically $10 million on a one where you can max out at 12 to 13 through incentives. Right. I don't think that's really going to change. So you're trying to put yourself in an opportunity to stay a starting quarterback. Now, the one that intrigues me is Jameis with a homecoming, assuming Tom Brady is actually done.
Right.
Because the one thing that I think Jameis has learned from his Sean Payton experience is turnover avoidance. So that he wouldn't quite be as cavalier with Bruce Arians' no risk it, no biscuit approach. That he would be a little more judicious and not throw 30 interceptions, because we saw that growth with him in New Orleans last year before the knee injury, that he would throw the ball away. There's nothing there, let me throw it away. He did that a lot more than he ever thought he would. So that could be intriguing from the standpoint that he knows the offense. And if you can cut down the turnovers, then that might be a viable option if they can't hit a home run and try to get one of these big name guys to come in.
Right. And then I think in those cases, you're also drafting a guy too, just in case, to make sure you're covered there.
Yeah, but this ain't the year compared to the last
year. Yes, you're right.
Get a quarterback, because I wonder where Davis Mills would go this year, because he went in the third round in a loaded quarterback draft. Is he considered in this group of potential first-round picks? Because these guys are going to get overdrafted because quarterbacks always do. This group reminds me more of the E.J. Manuel group.
2016, I think. Was that what it was?
13 maybe?
13. He went 16. He was the first
16,
quarterback at 16.
Quarterback
That's what it was. Yep.
Now, if Aaron Rodgers stays put, what could the Packers get for Jordan Love, and where would he be in the evaluation compared to these guys? He hasn't shown you much on the field, but he was a first-round pick in a year where you had better quarterbacks than this group.
True. And I think that's what, it may be that they wait and see how he does in the preseason to at least rebuild some of that market for him. But, and I guess the key there, Joel, what did you think of him coming out? And if you liked him and you just say, listen, I know what I've seen, but we liked him coming out for this reason and let's go get him. But I don't know that that's this team. So anyway, Joel, hey, listen, I appreciate it. You got anything else you want to plug? Any other stories coming up or anything else?
Yeah, I've got a piece I'm working on today for CBSSports.com on 15 to 20 guys who could be in different uniforms next year, either by trade or being released. And Landon Collins will be one of them.
Yeah, and that's he's definitely got to be on that list, because I know they want him back, but I know that cap hit is not desirable. And
he'll be under the release category, not the trade category.
Okay. Yeah, right. You could not trade him. Hey, I forgot to ask about JD McKissick, because, he was a guy that people like here, and I know they want to sign him, but he's coming off an injury. What kind of, do you think would be a big market for him?
Well, in that third down back role, he's probably looking at Naheem Hines at $6 million per year. Okay. I don't know if he can get that.
Okay. There you go. So just wanted to ask that one. Joel, listen, always appreciate you coming on. The knowledge is always great, and people need to check out the Inside the Cap podcast. There you go. Good stuff. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for having me.